been so long since I've done a proper TCR commentary that I've forgotten the fact that this is the Crucible Short Story Project. It's groundbreaking here at Snetterton and I'm joined by Mr. Lewis Bowers. What a cracking start that was.
Yeah, good evening everyone. Nice to be back with the TCRs.
It's nice as well to be back on the usual setup that we've been running off a 13-inch laptop for the past few weeks. Some interesting results. We're here back in all of the 60 FPS glory and we're watching Concrete in pole position. He was leading by near enough by 2 seconds from Gregor. Gregor was actually to watch Concrete go past through the Nelson that had there. So Colin, currently pulling away from the field. I believe a few more cars are on track than what we have on the time to go. Just waking itself up as we go through the qualifying session. So we'll stay on board with Colin. He is completely he's had a very good year this year, actually. Huge progress been made from the first half of the year. Showing us he's been cracking. 157.6, still P5. Which bit of time we went past. These TCRs have a tendency to do that.
Yeah, it's always good to see cars balancing over the curve.
Will is clearly showing that he needs to drive very aggressively in his qualifying session. I think only about half his cars on the track at that point.
Yeah, it is. It's always a risk.
Side by side, it's not the type of battling that you want when you're trying to start a decent back. Rosie may back out of it. I believe did actually set it does just at the very last moment there. Good to see battling already this early on in the weekend. So we're back on the setup when it looks to be quiet. Very session so far. The Giulietta is on the circuit. I had the pleasure of seeing them about 6 months ago.
Yes. There we go. Apologies for that there, folks. We were just having a couple of audio issues. We'll restart this again. We've just been having a nice little chat for the past 5 to 10 minutes to absolutely no one. But yes, welcome to round 8 of the Chris Not Insurance Touring Car Championship. We are here at Snetterton, and we were just saying about how good it is to see these cars heading round this narrow little circuit, the Giulietta TCRs, looking very aggressive, mounting the curves as much as possible. We saw Will Harper and Rosie Hudson having a little bit of a battle for track position here to get ready for another lap, and we've got about 5 minutes to go in the qualifying session now, and we've got audio this time, so I would like to once again welcome Mr. Lewis Bowers as we get ready to head into the weekend with audio.
Yes, let's try again. So good evening, everyone. As we've said, it's really nice to be here and see these amazing looking cars going around. As I said before, James Rose in this kind of livery reminiscent of, we think it's either 2019 or 2020 Alfa Romeo Formula One car in that kind of Valentine's Day livery. It's some of these cars do look very good on this circuit, getting all over the curves. Entry and exit, apex, everywhere there's a curve, they're aiming to hit it. Should lead to some interesting racing on track, wheel to wheel kind of a race time. As we see, the track's not very wide here at Snetterton. You've got maybe 2.5 car widths in places, which means that it could get a little bit hairy under braking potentially. But let's hope that is the case, because that always makes for some entertaining racing for us to talk about.
Yes, especially I imagine the reverse grid race we could be seeing a few on-track antics, which I'm all for. Always like a bit of racing action as we drag these cars, quite a few cars this weekend actually. I believe we are over about 12 or 13 cars. So yes, see a little bit of a lock-up from Greg Young there. Greg Young currently sitting P2, about 1.9 seconds behind Colin Knief. Colin Knief set an absolute flyer about 10 minutes ago, and no one has been able to challenge that yet. Maybe Greg, as we start to enter the final stages of this qualifying session, will be able to push towards that 153.3 to try and snatch pole position. Colin's usual competition, Matt Daly as ever, is unfortunately not able to make most of the qualifying session. We may still see him. There's 2 minutes, so just around about 3 minutes to go. You never know, Matt Daly might just whack a very fast lap in and find himself on pole position. He is actually in the session, I believe. He just hasn't set a lap yet, so we might have quite an interesting battle as we enter the final stages of this qualifying session now.
Yeah, as always with Matt Daly, he tends to be a bit of a kind of cometh the hour, cometh the man type qualifier, as we see a lock up from Greg Young there. But yeah, Matt Daly tends to be a kind of guy who comes out with about 2 minutes to go in qualifying, so let's hope we see him anytime soon. I believe he is still in the pits, but yeah, hopefully he'll be able to come out and maybe put the challenge to Colin Knief a little bit.
As you see, Rosie Hudson improving there with a personal best Sector 1. She's currently running P8 at the moment. Rob Whitney is just ahead of her in P7. And there's actually a nice little battle building between Will Inglis and Andrew Whitehead, only just over a tenth apart, with only 2 minutes to go. So let's see if they can push towards maybe the second row on the grid. Will Harper's currently enjoying P3. We saw him battling with Rosie for track position before, and we were mentioning, as that was happening, you wouldn't have been able to hear, we were mentioning just how brilliant these cars look as they mount the curbs at full chat, because there's a lot of heavy braking zones here at Snetterton. It's you look at it, the corners are quite broken up. There's not many kind of flowing corners, so it's quite easy to upset one of these TCR cars as all the weight goes towards the front axle.
Yeah, you might see a lot of guys, especially with the kind of changes in altitude, so to speak. These cars getting a little bit light over the rear. Could see some back ends starting to step out a little bit. Could always lead to some loss in lap time or a loss in position in the race. Hopefully, it won't be too much the case. Hopefully, we'll be able to see some good racing without too many mistakes from these drivers. It's always good to see them racing wheel to wheel, and whoever the fastest driver wins, as opposed to whoever can keep it on the road, which is always the case in these kind of very tricky technical British tracks.
Yes, they do provide a certain challenge, these British-themed tracks that we run in the TCR. Seriously, Will Harper improving his time there to expand him about another 0.3 there, so nice going for Will. He's looking fairly confident in on the second row of the grid at the moment, and seems to be setting himself well up for this race weekend. He could find himself with a nice haul of points. Colin Keneath is back out on track, and he's just set a purple sector 1. Not that he needs to, with a 1.9 second delta to P2, but he fancies his chances anyway. Might as well go for it while he still can. A bit of practice for the race, I imagine. I'm surprised he's not put the hards on and just gone for half a fuel load.
Yeah, it looks as though Matt Daly has disconnected from the server, so it doesn't look as though he'll be setting a lap in this qualifying session, which I'm sure is music to the ears of Colin Keneath.
It'd be brilliant to watch him going through the race, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Means he's got a bit of an extra challenge, a bit of traffic to get through before he can put a challenge to.
Personal best sector 2 there as well. Finds another 2.5 tenths. Yeah, this will be one to watch as he comes across the line, and that is the timer running out, and he set a 1:53 flat pretty much. That was a brilliant final attempt at qualifying from Colin Keneath, securing that pole position even more. Rob Whitney, is that Andrew Whitehead or Rob Whitney? I'm not quite sure. That is Andrew Whitehead with a 1:54.7 there, out of nowhere, really. We weren't paying that much attention to him. We should have been, because he's just gone P2, taken that P2 from Greg Young. Greg Young holding that for quite a while there. But yeah, that was another very nice lap from Andrew Whitehead. We've seen Colin and Andrew battling each other a fair bit in both the series that we're running this year, and that looks like it could be the case heading into this weekend as well. Greg Young having to return to the pits there, so he should be feeling reasonably confident with P3 as Will Harper abandons this lap and takes an interesting line into the pits there, just slightly nudging a few of the pit crew as he returns to the pit box there. Will Inglis currently P5 at the moment. He is coming towards the end of sector 2. He is not looking great at the moment. It's not his fastest so far. Can he claw it back as he heads through sector 2 though? This long right-hander Coram, you can find a lot of time here.
Yeah, it really is about being brave and holding as much speed as you can. That really, really long right-hander, as we said, but also setting yourself up as best you can for Murray's the last corner, a very sharp 90-degree left with a very nasty curve as Will Inglis comes across the line there, and I believe stays in 3rd position, although it might be
it's 5th position,
left,
I believe.
Yeah. So yeah, that curve on the inside of Murray's the last corner, you do not want to get too much on that, because that is a very, very steep curve that will upset you big time all the way down the centre straight and down into turn 1. That's not an area you want to get particularly wrong.
So then, as we end this qualifying session, it is Colin Keneath on pole with Andrew Whitehead P2 and Greg Young P3. We'll join you in just a moment for race 1 here at Snetterton. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the action here at Snetterton. We are ready for race 1. We've got just over 30 seconds until lights out, and we are all lined up on the grid. It's Colin Keneath on pole, Andrew Whitehead P2. We were just saying, actually, a bit of a weird grid here. Everyone's kind of parallel, and Lewis pointed out that Colin on pole is actually on the left-hand side of the track, not being given the racing line, so it could be quite an interesting one, maybe ones that the drivers aren't used to. Let's see how this launch goes. It could be quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, Colin there in pole position on the left-hand side of the track, where the first corner is to the right. You would maybe want pole on the inside to kind of box off a threat from the inside. But here we go then.
And we start to see the revs rise as we huge delay for the lights. It is 6 red lights on the gantry. And we are away. It looks to be a pretty even launch. Colin just edging out just a little bit there. He gets a nose out in front. Greg Young getting a fairly good launch as well. He finds himself pretty much on the rear end of Andrew Whitehead now. Will Harper's got the inside line there as Colin Keneath goes round the outside and boxes off Andrew Whitehead there already about 2 tenths. It looks like Andrew Whitehead went a little bit wide there, dipping onto the grass. He's kept it facing the right direction though, so not too much loss there. It looks like there seems to have been a few position changes further down the order there. George Brook Batterby losing out fairly substantially there. He did actually qualify about P5 in qualifying. He's now P7. Matt Daly has found himself P6 already, so he's had a cracking start there. See the back end of the car lifting up off the ground. It's Colin Keneath still leading, about half a second between him and Andrew Whitehead. Greg Young close in on that action as well as Will Harper. There's a huge train still. Everyone very close together at the start of this lap.
Yeah, so a good clean start from everyone by the looks of it. Not too much argy-bargy. Colin Keneath doing well there to get the nose in front into the first corner. As we see Matt Daly now on his charge back up the grid as he maybe looks up the inside, then tries to go around the outside.
There's a big lock, but he makes contact with Will Inglis there. Not all is lost though, as we see Will Inglis getting ahead of him, and he's thinking about trying to get past Will Harper, but he's probably going to have to think about a defence instead as they head down the Bentley straight. George Brook Batterby kicking the back end of the car onto the grass a little bit. He's going to lose out a little bit, and Matt Daly and Will Inglis are side by side pretty much heading down the Bentley straight. Matt Daly didn't quite have the pace that I thought he would heading down that straight, maybe a little bit of a difference in setup. They bang wheels as they head into Brundle there, and they are still making contact. These two on this very narrow circuit are wheel to wheel. It is brilliant racing action between these two. They are about as elbows out as you want to be before you end up spinning the car in the wrong direction.
Yeah, so it looks as though Will Inglis lost out big time there, losing the position not only to Matt Daly but also to George Brook Batterby. Unfortunately for him, there is yeah, some rubbing his racing definitely happening. I think there was some elbows out action. Good to see, as we say.
It did just also interesting phenomenon. Saw Will Harper take flight through Murray's there. That was yeah, saw in qualifying. He's been very aggressive with the curbs. He's found a driving style that suits him around the circuit, and it is brilliant to watch. I hope he carries on doing it throughout the race. I'm not sure his pit engineers will think the same though, or his suspension, or his chassis, or his engine mounts, or anything on that car wants him to do that, but I want him to do that. So carry on doing that as Matt Daly copies him there, heading through Montreal. He is currently P5 at the moment, but I imagine with Will Harper putting on a defence like that, he may struggle to get past anytime soon, as Rob Whitney is side by side with James Rose, and there's contact between Paul Millman and Guy Swarbrick. Guy Swarbrick is finding himself in a wall now. He's going to have a fair amount of aero damage there, as does Paul Millman. Looks like Paul Millman came off worse in terms of damage there, but he has been able to carry on. He has got Jack Hudson, or Rosie Hudson rather, hot on his tail. Only about half a second now. You see that car's not looking particularly fun to drive at this point in time. What a shame so early on in the race.
Yeah, so as we see there, the width of the track coming to bear. Unfortunately, there's not always the amount of space to correct for a slightly missed braking point. If you're trying to nose up the inside, you haven't got the room to bail out. So yeah, those two coming together there, unfortunately, resulting in a bit of damage for probably both cars.
See Matt Daly getting very close in the slipstream, very close to the rear end of Will Harper's car there, under braking. I imagine he's going to try and get braver and braver to think about a move on him. Of course, Will Harper will not let up easy though, and they could end up coming together much like Will Inglis and Matt Daly did but a lap ago. As you see Will Harper's car sliding about just in front of Matt there. Meanwhile, out in front there's nearly a 3-second gap between Colin Keneath and Andrew Whitehead. Andrew Whitehead is by no means a slow driver, but Colin is carrying on with that pace that we saw in qualifying and is absolute class of the field at the moment. So 153.6. That would have been a very impressive qualifying time. Although, to be fair to Andrew Whitehead, he also posted a very good time at 1:55.6. Otherwise, would have been pretty much the fastest. Greg Young there with him as well. As we see, Matt Daly has finally got past Will Harper. Not by much though, he's still under pressure a little bit from Will Harper. Will Harper locks up under braking down and is now under pressure from George Brook Battersby as they head through Montreal. That tight right-hander there, again one of the many harsh braking zones on this circuit there, and these TCR cars are so easy to lock up, and there's contact between Will Harper and Matt Daly through Palmer, I believe that was. Just caught the back end there. Bit of a Formula Drift going on there. Still is the case for Will Harper, actually, under braking there. Yeah, that was a little bit of a sketchy Sector 1 for Will there.
Yeah, both those cars getting very, very sideways there. Really good to see both of them catch it, to be fair. Credit to both the drivers there. Some immense skill to be able to recognise that slide coming and both keep the cars facing in the right direction. A little bit of a sort of sympathy spin from George Brook Battersby, almost getting a bit sideways as well, as he had to get big on the brakes mid-corner. As we see, once again, Will Harper getting all over the curbs and all over the grass, spraying up a little bit of dirt for the cars behind him to drive through. But yeah, that was interesting, shall we say. Not necessarily the quickest way around the track, but as always, entertaining for us to see a little bit of tandem drifting here in Snetterton.
Yeah, these Giulietta TCRs are always hilarious to watch around Snetterton. Because they're quite a dynamic car to look at anyway, but you put them on a tight, twisty, kind of bumpy track like Snetterton and it just adds to it. Will Harper is defending with all of his might against George Brook Battersby as they head into Sector 3 now. Greg Young getting the back end of the car right up in the air there, about 30 foot off the ground. Colin Keefe setting another fastest lap of the race. He's extending that gap even more. Andrew Whitehead's going to soon be starting to think about defence from Greg Young. Greg Young's put in a couple of decent laps, and as they come to the end of the centre straight, he's edging ever closer, although dropping back a little bit through Riches there. But yeah, about 7 seconds between P1 and P2 already. This early on in the race, Colin is looking to be the class of the field. Although let's not count some misfortune out. A curb could catch him out, maybe ends up facing the wrong direction. Never say never. Only about half a second between Paul Millman and Rob Whitney. Rob Whitney, or rather Paul Millman, carrying a little bit of damage as they head into Montreal themselves. Paul Millman taking that inside line on the exit. Gets a very nice exit. They are near enough side by side, although he has to dip in behind on this occasion.
Yeah, so some really good looking racing there. The switch track might have been on, potentially. Didn't look as though he got as good an exit as he could have hoped for. As we jump on with Rosie Hudson now quite close to the back of I believe James Rose, yeah, in the nice red livery there. Looks as though this might be a good little battle forming up here, to be fair. There's a little bit of heat from the back from Stephen Knight there, just potentially adding a little bit of pressure to Rosie, maybe making her think twice about any kind of potential lunges. Of course, it's always risky when there's someone behind you to snap up any mistakes that you make. But yeah, Colin Keefe up there in first place. A 7-second gap is more than enough to be relatively comfortable at this point.
And it looks like Will Harper has made a bit of an error at the end of the Bentley straight there. We saw how aggressive he is on the curbs, and maybe unfortunately it's caught him out at this stage in the race. What a shame. He was doing quite a nice job up in P5, now finds himself in P7 with a bit of clean air, so hopefully he should still be able to get some nice laps in and make some good headway into the race. But yeah, that has handed P5 to George Brook Battersby, who is feeling a little bit of pressure from Will Inglis, although not too much at this moment. And Matt Daly is putting the pressure on Greg Young down the centre straight as they head into Riches. He dives down the inside, under braking there, thinks about a move. He's going to have to back out of it though from that far back, otherwise they're going to have a monstrous collision there. Only about 2/10 apart as they head into Montreal. He's going to have to go round the outside there. Big lock up for Greg Young. Greg Young nearly spins the car round under, I believe that was all four wheels locking up there. I haven't seen a lock-up like that in a while. Matt Daly is able to get ahead with a better exit. Obviously set up himself so much nicer for the corner after that big lock-up from Greg, and he finds himself on the podium already. P3 for Matt Daly as he heads through Palmer there.
Yeah, Greg Young just getting a bit too bold on the brakes, maybe a bit too worried about who's behind him, and
another big lock-up.
Maybe so maybe just a little bit too brave on the brakes, trying to get into that, and then you misjudge your braking point, and it all happens a bit fast, and you end up sliding like he's done a couple of times there. Matt Daly looking like he was relatively happy just to stay comfortable.
Another lock-up.
He really seems to be struggling on these brakes, and that's not going to do wonders for his tyres either.
No, his confidence as well, I imagine, will be absolutely shot at this point with the car. He's doing a very good job so far. One thing to consider, this is obviously an open setup championship. The drivers are free to change things like brake balance or brake pressure as much as they choose, and maybe Greg's gone for something like a qualifying setup that as the tyres get lower on grip, he's just starting to struggle with a little bit, as we see there another lock-up again, and that is just going to be a perpetual issue if it is, because he's going to keep losing grip, keep locking up more. So yeah, it's one to watch. Greg Young currently running the soft tyre, as pretty much everyone in the field is, apart from Rob Winnie. He's running the medium tyre. So yeah, an interesting one for Greg Young now, as can he basically limp that car home for the rest of the race?
Yeah, it seems as though it's basically going to be a bit of damage limitation for him. Unfortunately, he's had a bit of an incident, maybe with the setup, as we see. Is that Paul Milner making a bit of error and losing out to James Rose there? Yeah, I think the setup can make quite a lot of difference, especially when you look at kind of brakes. It's obviously, as we've said a couple of times, a very brake dependent circuit. You can make up a lot of time being good on the brakes, which obviously pushes the drivers to make more aggressive setup changes. But in the case of Greg Young, there it looks as though it's just maybe not been the right setup call for him. You see George Battersby now starting to close up maybe a little bit to the back of him there, hoping to advance his position. But I think Matt Daly up in P3 now has sort of almost shot himself in the foot by being unable to attend qualifying, because even if he does get past Andrew Whitehead in P2, he's not going to have, saying this kind of relatively confidently, but we don't know obviously what's going to happen, but he's not going to have enough time really to close up to Colin Knief. We saw last week in the Formula Alphas, there was a really good battle between those two for the lead. But I don't think that's going to form up this time. Obviously, these two guys very quick, very similar on lap times. So yeah, it looks as though Matt Daly's maybe going to have to set himself up a little bit in a better position for the reverse grid race that will follow this one, as we're just approaching the halfway point in this first racing tonight.
Yes, it's certainly an interesting one for Matt Daly. As we know, he's got some brilliant pace, but so far he hasn't really demonstrated quite the same pace as Colin Knief. Colin Knief has just been in a league of his own. It's about 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds slower than Colin at the moment is Matt. So yeah, as you say, he may be just focusing his efforts on P2 in front, or he would, I imagine, he'd be very happy with the podium, having not qualified regardless. But yeah, interesting that he mentioned just how difficult this circuit can be under brakes and how brake dependent it is. I had some very little experience in TCR cars. Admittedly, it was a German car. It was a Seat Leon. And yeah, I just couldn't get the brakes out right, and as a result, pretty much locking into every corner, and that obviously completely demolishes the tyres, as we see Andrew Whitehead losing out a little bit to Matt Daly. Matt Daly getting a bit of airtime heading through the Rich's right-hander there. He's now only about 2.5 seconds behind Andrew Whitehead, or make that about 3 based on where they are on track. But Greg Young is certainly not out of the count. I was thinking we were going to start to see him lose a little bit of pace, but that hasn't totally been the case. Maybe he's finally starting to feel a little bit comfortable with the car again as they get into the latter half of this race. Obviously, as the tyres change, the car starts to feel a little bit different to set up, or the cars get lighter, so fuel loads get lighter as well. The car is always changing, and the track is as well. Obviously, the track getting more and more grippy as we go on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've seen a couple of times in the past with the way the cars evolve as the race goes on. So it could be that potentially the setup that Greg has gone for, or his driving style, potentially suits a car on some slightly worn tyres. So we could see him start to come into his own a little bit towards the end of the race. He seems to be holding his gap to George Battersby behind him very well there. As we see this Rob Whitney, James Rose, and Paul Millman forming a little train there. Potentially going to be Paul Millman can catch onto the back of that. A three-way battle for P8. Some good points there for these guys if they can make the moves. Obviously, it's going to put a lot of pressure on Rob. If he can hold this off for 11 minutes, I'll be quite impressed. Yeah, only about 4 tenths separating them now as they head onto the Bentley straight. It's going to be James Rose who has the advantage on exit there. He was already gaining on, and they are now side by side. And we're starting to see James Rose just pull away down the straight, really. Maybe a difference in setup, or maybe setting himself up so much better out of the Williams there. But is he going to lose it under braking? He's not got the ideal line for the next corner, although he gives him back the inside line into Nelson there, and he is able to switch back and take
P8. Well done to James for a good little battle there down the Bentley Straight. A difficult one to execute in that braking zone, because as we've seen with the likes of Will Harper and so many times before here at Snetterton, it's a very difficult, it doesn't look it, but those two corners can catch you out big time.
Yeah, the weight is flying around a bit there in the car when you're coming to the end of a big straight like that, stamping on the brakes, and then you've got a fast left followed by a very sharp right. It can be very difficult to nail the kind of the weight balance of the car coming forwards like that. So and obviously the curbs as well. We've seen these guys curbing very aggressively, and that doesn't do anything for for the car's balance, shall we say, as they don't always look particularly happy going over those curbs.
They certainly don't. Interesting seeing a bit of a difference in driving style between these two drivers here. Rob Whitney being much more conservative through that right-hander there. I imagine looking after the tyres a lot more, whereas we see Paul Millman absolutely hanging it in there, putting so much load through those tyres, and he gained a substantial amount of time, but is he going to suffer with that later on in the race? We see Rob Whitney kicking up a little bit of dirt into the windscreen of the car behind, but Paul Millman certainly gaining. It's just whether or not that is going to be sustainable as we head into the later stages of this race now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part and parcel of the difficulty of this kind of 25-minute sprint, is that you do have to consider, even though it is only a sprint, you do have to consider how your tyres and your brakes are going to behave towards the end of the race. It is a long time for these cars to be at the ragged edge, so potentially could see some errors. And these drivers as well. It's a long time to be focusing very specifically on some very critical braking points and curbing and all that kind of stuff that these guys do so well on a week in, week out basis. Yeah,
it's one thing to consider actually. It can be a bit of a slog for the drivers, because of course they've got a 25-minute wall-to-wall race for the likes of Colin Knief, who's although having very little pressure, is putting in some blistering laps, and then for the likes of Rob Whitney in the mid-pack here, who's had very little let-up. You've got a 25 minutes of non-stop racing action, and then you've got a small little break, and then you're back at it again. So it is no easy feat. It can feel like a bit of an endurance event, I am sure. We've got 50 minutes of racing as well as qualifying, and a bit of practice before as well. A hell of a lot of driving goes into these weekends, and the rewards are certainly seen here. Some excellent action so far.
Yeah, absolutely. As we cross into the last 10 minutes or so of the race, race one here, this battle seeming to be the closest one on track, I believe, by the looks of it. These guys not necessarily putting any direct pressure on each other, but able to just kind of be in each other's mirrors. Paul Millman definitely glad to be potentially putting some pressure on Rob Whitney into the braking zones. As he looks there, Rob Whitney actually taking a bit of a defensive line there, kind of in the middle of the track. That's not necessarily.
Yeah, he's going to have to think about defence now. And on the outside there, he's been able to keep the speed up, so he's not lost out like we've seen a couple of drivers do on that exit. But yeah, Paul Millman is certainly there now. One thing to note is Rob Whitney is on the medium tyres, so they could still not be providing him as much grip as could be in Paul's car. Paul is actually carrying a very minor amount of damage, although it won't affect him too badly. He may want to concede, or may think about, does he let this position go, get his lap times back up as he's no longer defending, and try and get the position back in the later stages of the race, because the soft tyre will start to struggle towards the end.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think there's a lot that goes into that decision. You know, he's got to consider how far in front is the car in front of him. I think it's James Rose, as we see there. Will Harper and is that
Willing Bliss? That is
a
lot of air for Will Harper there, just up on two wheels. That suspension is putting in hours heading through that Brundle left-hander there, and oh dear, not sure what happened. They're not sure if that was a bit of an aggressive curve for Will Harper, but it absolutely flung the car into the sky there, and Will Harper disconnects. I'm not sure if that could be a technical issue or whatever. What a shame to see his race end like that. That was I wasn't expecting to see NASA.
No. Yeah.
Small Saturn V. That now promotes James Rose into P7.
Yeah, so unfortunately there, I think it looks as though he might have got onto the entry curbs a little bit, potentially. That just upset the car a little bit, and then obviously it goes from bad to worse as the car starts to bounce like that and
enter orbit. Yes.
Not entirely sure air traffic control were expecting any messages from us today, but they've certainly got one. As we see this little battle forming up here, a bit of a lock up there.
Yeah, it was very, very late on the brakes for Guy Swarbrick then. In comparison to the car in front, that was, I imagine, a bit of a scary moment for him, but he kept it true, kept the nose clean, and they head down the centre straight now, about a second apart this time round. Someone who is only about a second apart as well is Matt Daly from Andrew Whitehead. He's getting closer. Looks like Andrew Whitehead hasn't been 100% as comfortable as Matt Daly with the car as they head down the Bentley straight. Andrew Whitehead getting a little bit of dirt. He's kicking up there. The rear axle going onto the dirt there as we see Matt Daly taking the curbs, heading into that left right-hander, heading through Bomb Hole and going into Coram.
Yeah, so it looks as though Matt Daly just been able to use his empty space a little bit more effectively than Andrew Whitehead and getting some very good laps, looking as though he's about just under a second a lap faster on their fastest laps. As Colin Knief, speaking of fastest laps, sets another fastest
1:53.4.
He's as always is absolutely flying up in front there. It just looks as though he's in complete control of this race, as we see Rosie Hudson and Guy Swarbrick have swapped positions there. Rosie getting all over the grass there. That's not exactly where you want to be.
And it looks like the tyres are starting to struggle now. I see the amount of understeer. She's absolutely putting in as much steering angle as possible, and the car's not quite communicating back to her.
Yeah, so we could see the soft tyres starting to go off a bit, so that could mean that Rob Whitney is in a bit of a better position going towards the end of this race. Only about 5 minutes to go now, so if he is going to see any benefits, they're going to have to come quite soon. Otherwise, it's going to be far too little, too late. Although based on the pace of Colin Knief, I'm not entirely sure whether or not those soft tyres are falling off quite as much as we necessarily think they are. Andrew Whitehead and Matt Daly there, still within about a second of each other, so that could still be a little bit of an interesting battle as we enter the final stages of the race for that second step on the podium and those all-important championship points. But we're yet to see anything in the way of wheel-to-wheel action for those two guys.
No, I thought I'd just put the camera on Colin Knief for a little while, just so we can appreciate some qualifying laps in quick succession, because that's what these are. These have been pretty much inch perfect. We've seen him kicking up a little bit of dirt there, commentator's curse of course, but yeah, he's put in a stellar job, and it's the type of performance that we saw him earlier on in the season absolutely run away in terms of the points. It has been a little bit closer recently in terms of the standings. We had a little bit of a reshuffle a few rounds ago, but yeah, this is a very Colin Knief-esque drive.
Yeah, he always seems to be in a relatively good pace, and seems to control the race from the lead when he is there. As we see George Battersby and Greg Young battling for that fourth place. These two drivers have been relatively close to each other for most of the race, I believe.
Yeah, they were pretty much identical on pace for the past few laps as well.
So yeah, it looks as though this could be a battle to form up again. We see again Greg Young getting very deep on the brakes and locking up there, giving George Battersby a little bit more track position and a little bit more time getting in the toe there.
Yeah.
Looking as though he's going to have a look up the inside. Be very brave to have a look up the inside into Richard. It's a very, very fast right-hander.
Switch to the outside instead. They're going to be near enough. I was about to say side by side, but he thought better of it. I was expecting a lunge on the brakes there, but at this stage in the race, that's a bit risky, I think. But Inter Montreal there, they are pretty much braking at the same position, actually. So they are, completely on each other. These two, obviously, now with a fair bit of experience racing with each other. One of my favourite things to watch is two drivers just keep piling the pressure on to each other. So we see the back end of George Battersby's car. They're getting a little bit upset. That's not going to help him as he tries to charge towards P4. But he is still only around about half a second behind. So yeah, these two are pretty much, I imagine, not going to let up until the very end of the race.
No, not at all, and that's exactly what we want to see. We want to see these guys absolutely on it until the checkered flag waves, as we see maybe a little bit more curving from George Battersby there. These guys are going to have some slightly different lines based on the setup and based on what they're comfortable with. As we've said, their lap pace seems to be relatively identical, so whatever they're doing is working for them. And that means that they're going to be faster and slower in different parts of the track, which makes this all a lot more interesting as we see them coming down the Bentley straight here. I think it's a little bit too far away. Yeah, definitely a little bit too far away from a move from George Battersby there. But if he can hold on to it,
always very brave there, and that has caught him out big time.
Yeah, he just got a little bit too brave into Brundle there and just lost a load of time, lost control of the back end, and at that point it's all a little bit too late for him there, as he's lost a load of time now and potentially comes into the sights of Will Inglis in P6. He's going to have to be careful, as though
Will Inglis is having his much like Will Harper, looks to be that curb has caught him out there. So maybe these tyres are starting to become a little bit less communicative at this stage in the race. We see Matt Daly as well has also found a little bit of time on Andrew Whitehead. So as soon as I find my mouse cursor, we'll be joining that. Yeah, Matt Daly now very close, but yeah, so that was a bit of an undoing to some people's race, the end of that lap there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I think that is probably the case, Reeve. You're right that the tyres, as they start to go off, the back end of these cars starts to step out a little bit more, and it's very difficult to catch that, especially when you're under in the kind of loads. We see Andrew Whitehead running quite deep there, maybe opening the door a little bit for Matt Daly, although that doesn't seem to have been the case. Just Matt Daly closing in on him. Andrew Whitehead's got to be absolutely squeaky clean here as we enter the last stages of this race.
Matt Daly's not being absolutely squeaky clean, but he's being very aggressive, and he is reaping the rewards for that. He is now only about half a second, 3/10 behind Andrew Whitehead. This is the overtake that he's been working towards for pretty much half the race at this point. As they head onto the Bentley straight, he's going to enjoy the benefit of the tow. This might be one of his final opportunities in this race if he can get close enough. I don't think he can, though. It looks like Andrew Whitehead's car's got the legs on him down the straight, because bear in mind he's got the tow. He is hardly gaining. And under brakes, though, you see a little bit of a twitch at the back end from Andrew Whitehead's car. Yeah, these cars are not confidence-inspiring into this heavy braking zone, I can imagine. See him thinking about or looking at the inside line there just to put that extra bit of pressure on the car in front. They're still 3/10 apart as we get ready to start the next lap of the race, and he is so achingly close there.
Yeah, it just looks as though that where Matt Daly is quicker is not necessarily places he can make the pass particularly easily. And Andrew Whitehead will be very glad of that fact as he sticks all the way over to the right for the first part.
Andrew Whitehead squeezing him a little bit there as Matt Daly opts to go around the outside line there. It's not ideal. He's going to be very brave if he tries to get a move done on this occasion. I think he's going for it. Around the outside of Richards, that very fast right-hander. He's edged out in front into the braking zone of Montreal, and it looks like Andrew Whitehead's going to be able to take that back, box him off on the exit as he does. That is textbook overtaking from both of those drivers there. That was very brave and some brilliant racing. As we see the back end of Matt Daly's car hanging out through Palmer there.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant to see that. I think Matt Daly there was very, very brave to go around the outside. It's doable. It's obviously doable, as he did manage to make it stick briefly. But yeah, I think that was maybe a little bit optimistic. Andrew Whitehead did so well to stay composed and stick to his line and just get big on the brakes and take that position back into Montreal and box him off on the exit of that.
Always brilliant to see racing action like this on the penultimate lap of the race as well. So we see Matt Daly trying to use as much track as he can to intimidate that car in front there. Will we see the back end start to struggle again? No, it looks to be a little bit more composed this time around. Will he be able to gain down the Bentley straight? He wasn't able to last time. Maybe he's got a bit of a better exit, but although he's further back this time, Andrew Whitehead's been able to defend after a lot of hard work. He's still P2 for the moment.
Yeah, I think this could definitely come down to the last couple of corners as we see a small lock-up from Matt Daly there into Nelson.
Just going to join as well. Paul Millman and Rob Whitney are battling. I believe that is for the lead of the AM race. It is. Rob Whitney's actually now promoted to Pro. Apologies. I did notice that a few rounds ago, but I apologise for that one. Rob, you are now in the Pro category, so well done. Was Paul Millman currently leading that AM race? He is still fighting for P8 though. Every point count, or every bit of track position. I imagine all these races want. They're still only about a 10th apart, these two, as they start the next lap. Colin Kiefer started the final lap, but the action is all happening for this fight for P2. They are pretty much side by side, heading down the centre straight. It looks to be pretty much the same scenario this time. Matt Daly might back out of it a little bit earlier this time, but they are near enough, wheel to wheel, down into the braking zone of Montreal. They are side by side. Andrew Whitehead's able to box him off yet again. He's just pretty much copy and paste the previous lap, although this time Matt Daly's got the better exit through that inside line there. And as they head into Richie's, he's going to have the outside line again. They are pretty much switchback central. There is a little bit of contact. They are wheel to wheel banging, but it is still Andrew Whitehead in P2. That was a hard fought P2 in Sector 1 there.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, looked as though it was going to be a bit of a copy-paste from the previous lap, as Reeve says. But no, Matt Daly, challenging a little bit differently, coming up with a bit of a switchback move to try and get it done on the exit of Montreal. And unfortunately, a little bit of contact as we see Andrew Whitehead running wide on the exit there. That could be quite costly for him potentially. But yeah, it just looked as though these two guys are right at the edge of edge of the grip that these CCRs are willing to provide after 25 minutes of hard fought racing.
It looks to be there has been contact between these two. We were focusing on the battle earlier. Actually, our timing screen said it was worse than it actually was. Good to see that these two are still neck and neck as they head into the final lap of this race. And speaking of heading into the final lap of this race, it is Colin Knief who is heading round the Coram, that sweeping right-hander there, and he is on the centre straight now after what has to be a decisive victory. It was pretty much uncontested from turn 1, lap 1, and with a 16-second gap, Colin Knief takes the win. Well done to Colin there for a very good start to this race weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a bit of a Colin Knief special, I think we can say, as we see this battle coming very close.
They are still near enough side by side as they come to the end of the race. It is Andrew Whitehead who's going to edge it out just a little bit there. Andrew Whitehead P2, Matt Daly P3. That is the type of battle that we like to see going on to the very last second.
Yeah, absolutely. It just looked as though these guys have given exactly the right amount of room the whole way through. A little bit of wheel bashing towards the end there, but yeah, Greg Young done very well there to come across to come up to the end of his race in P4 after some issues on the brakes. He crosses the line now. Yeah, very good race from him to get some good points.
Yeah, very nice points all at the end for him there, as you said. Wasn't entirely sure he was going to be able to get that car to the end, but he does so, and does so with a nice result, as does George Brooke Battersby, someone as well who's had to fight quite hard, and he weaves across the track in celebration of that P5. Well-deserved celebration there. I'm surprised the back end didn't kick out at this stage with the tyres the way that they are, and Will Inglis as well coming across line P6 with James Rose. A very nice result for James, actually, taking home P7. Paul Millman as well, leading that AM race, heads round Murray's and comes home P8. So well done to Paul. And then after a little bit of contact that we saw in the previous lap, Rob Whitney settles for P9 in the end, but still in the point scoring positions.
Yeah, a good result there to get some points right at the end, and obviously sets him up quite nicely for the reverse grid race that's to come. As we see that Steve Knight there coming into Murray's for the last time in this first race, and Guy Swarbrick following him. A good race some good racing from these guys, all up and down the grid. Really good to see the guys pushing the limits of their abilities, as we see Colin Knief pulling into the pits there.
Yeah, very timely from Colin there to head into the pits right as we come to the end of race 1. He completes his parade lap, so that was certainly an action-packed race 1. Very enjoyable to see, and I think is he going home?
Looks as though he's gone into the car park. He's
something's broken on it, or he's left his phone on charge or something. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's a. Or wants a beer. I think he should have a beer. Definitely. Well, maybe not. I mean, race 2's in a minute, Colin. So not quite. Oh, he's parking it as well. Very polite of him. See, yeah, brilliant effort from Colin there. And what an end to a very action-packed race 1. We'll see you in just a few moments as we get ready for the reverse grid part of this weekend, race 2. Back, ladies, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is race 2. It's the reverse grid race here at Snetterton. We have got an eclectic grid this around. Rob Whitney on pole, Will Inglis P2, Greg Young P3, Matt Daly P4, Andrew Whitehead P5, me apparently P6, although I can assure you I'm not partaking. I am currently the only medium runner actually this time around. So let's see how I go on that strategy. We have got about 20 seconds until lights out. We've got James Rose very last minute being able to join the session there. He's now P2 on the grid and we are ready to go. The red starting to rise. We wait for the gantry once again. It's been very slow recently, these lights, but it is 6 red lights on the gantry. And it's not the best camera, but we are away. And George Brook-Batterby gets in just at the last second. No, he doesn't. Unfortunately, he has to start from the pits. If he'd given that another couple of seconds, he would have been in. But it is Rob Whitney and James Rose. Oh no, it's Will Inglis currently leading the race now. James Rose taking P2 in the end. Rob Whitney being swarmed a little bit by all those cars heading round Riches there. Everyone bumping their way through the right-hander. And Will Inglis getting a very good launch there, finding himself running P1 with Andrew Whitehead now P2. He swept his way up through the grid very quickly, as did Matt Daly. He's very close to P3 if he plays his cars right through this left-hander now. And it looks like he is planning to do that, going down that inside line there. He's got James Rose for company though, boxing him off just a little bit there, giving him a bit of a squeeze on exit. They're going to be side by side as they head towards Agostini there. That left-hand complex there that can trick quite a few drivers out there. It's a bit of a tricky little section is the end of Sector 1. Although I say the end of Sector 1, Sector 1's huge here. Matt Daly now P3 getting past James Rose there. And Will Inglis getting a little bit of an advantage on Andrew Whitehead, although not too much, not as if we saw with Colin Keneath. And speaking of Colin Keneath, he's currently P7. And there's major contact there for Guy Swarbrick. Guy Swarbrick, I'm not sure it was contact actually, or just a bit of a spin around there, but whatever reason, he's now down in P11. What a shame. We're seeing Colin Keneath is having to fight his way up through the grid with Greg Young. Very speedy driver. He's going to have to work hard to get past down the Bentley straight.
Yeah, so a very busy looking start there. Almost two sort of groups forming there. The kind of top 7 looking as though they were up together, and then the rest of the drivers maybe a little bit closer together at the back there, as we see Colin Keneath going. Oh, Colin Keneath there forcing Rob Whitney wide. He's probably not going to be particularly pleased about that. Colin Keneath normally so clean with his overtakes.
Can he join in time? Yes, he can. I was a bit worried about
Rob
that.
Whitney getting a bit brave on that rejoin.
Yeah, I suppose once to get back on track as quickly as possible. We see Andrew Whitehead gaining on Will Inglis a little bit. I'm not sure if he's getting on Will Inglis or he's trying his best to escape Matt Daly close behind there. We're going to have a bit of a three-way battle for the lead here, and I'm all for that as these two start to run away just a little bit. Colin Keneath now finding himself in P5, slowly hunting down James Rose, having got past Greg Young. Greg Young doing a very good job in the previous race. Let's hope he can repeat that this time around. Rosie Hudson's got a very good start to this. She's actually currently running P7. Let's hope she can keep that up. Maybe challenge with Paul Milburn just a little bit as we head further into the race now. Starting to see these top 3 drivers here trading purple sectors on that previous lap then. So they are pretty much on pace with each other, and we could be on for a very good battle between these 3. Only a second covering them for the moment. And Matt Daly is soon thinking about dispatching Andrew Whitehead in his hunt to come closer to Will Inglis there, as they head pretty much in train formation through the left-hander then.
Yeah, Matt Daly potentially having to consider the fact that he's got to try and get ahead of Colin Keneath in the sort of net standings there. The quicker he can get rid of the guys in front of him, the quicker he can try and build a gap from Colin Keneath. I think that is probably going to be his closest rival in this race. Though we did see some very strong pace from Andrew Whitehead at the end of that race, and very good wheel-to-wheel racing with Matt Daly, so potentially looking to Matt Daly looking to maybe try and finish what he started in the back end of the first race, as we see these guys so close together now, 4 tenths, less than 4 tenths separating.
Yeah, it's battles galore here. We've got a battle for 4th and a very good battle for the lead going on as they head into that very tricky braking zone that is the Brundle-Nelson complex there. The order hasn't changed. The order has changed though between Colin Keneath and James Rose there. He's got ahead now in P4. He's totally going to be hunting down Matt Daly up in P3. Only half a second separating these 3 cars as they get ready to start next lap, heading through Carham now and heading into Murray's. We've seen Murray's can catch a couple of drivers out. Will it be the case for these 3 as they head through? The order still hasn't changed once again. These are very close, very highly skilled racing going on here as Andrew Whitehead has to dip onto the grass a little bit to make sure he's clear of Matt Daly. Matt Daly getting ahead of Andrew now in P2 is Matt Daly, and they're going to head into Riches under braking. Who's going to be braver is going to be Will Inglis, who's able to box off Matt Daly. Daly, although Matt Daly's left open the door a little bit for Andrew Whitehead on this time around. They are making contact, bumper to bumper, as they head down into Montreal. It is anyone's game. Andrew Whitehead able to get back past down the inside line there, although not getting an ideal exit. They are so close together, it is almost hard to keep track. Willingliss still in the lead though.
Yeah, it just looked as though both Matt Daly and Andrew Whitehead got a better exit than Willingliss on that last corner of that previous lap there. And Willingliss could only go one way, and he chose to defend from Andrew Whitehead, so Matt Daly managed to slingshot it as we see them go
still side by side.
Matt Daly getting up the inside and just being able to push Andrew Whitehead wide as he now takes that second position, looking as though he's going to challenge Willingliss for the lead. Some brilliant racing here, it has to be said, but all this time Colin Knief has closed about a second, if not more, out of that gap, so he's going to be looking to join this battle as quickly as he can. Yeah,
these two, they seem to have dropped off from Colin just a little bit, but yeah, as you were saying, this battling is allowing Colin to catch up, but they are positioning the car absolutely perfectly. It is so millimetrically close between these three. Yeah, some brilliant racing going on. It is one of the most difficult skills to capture in racing, is to race this closely for an extended period of time, and so far they're doing an excellent job of it. It is currently Andrew Whitehead P3, Matt Daly P2 and Willingliss P1, but I imagine this is going to chop and change a lot as we head further into this race.
Yeah, Willingliss doing a great job to stay where he is at the moment. He's got some real heat on him from Matt Daly and Andrew Whitehead, two of the fastest drivers in this series. Willingliss is probably a little bit scared, is probably not the right word, maybe a little bit nervous of what's behind him, as we see as Colin Knief's probably going to start appearing in his mirrors as Matt Daly gets a better exit and runs on the outside. He really quite likes that outside line into Richards. Is he going to make it work as he tries to force Willingliss wide? He gets ahead in the first instance.
Oh, so close.
Looks as though Willingliss is going to have the inside line for the braking into turn 2. Andrew Whitehead almost looked as though he was going to try and go up the middle there and make it 3 wide.
Well, he's thinking about it, and Matt Daly's lost out big time there. They've pretty much squeezed him out on exit there, and then Matt Daly's been able to counter it somehow and find himself Peter. I'm not quite sure how he did that, because it looked like Andrew Whitehead had the move done. Andrew Whitehead's now got Colin Knief for company. He's dropped off from that fight a little bit. I'm not sure he'll be entirely pleased with that. But yeah, what an excellent kind of go round Montreal that was. It was anyone's game for that corner, and now it's a 4-way battle for the lead all of a sudden.
We're not going to complain about that at all here. We love to see it. I think Andrew Whitehead there maybe looking, or Matt Daly potentially. Difficult to say who was really at fault there. I don't think it was. I think a racing incident is probably the best way to describe it. Those guys maybe just getting a little bit too, let's say, idealistic about the size of their cars. These cars are quite big.
And there's contact for the lead there. Oh, Matt Daly was very lucky to avoid collecting the other couple of cars there. I believe they were just pretty much wheel to wheel, and a little bit of a misjudgment meant that Matt Daly found some tyres.
Yes,
is the technical term for it. And unfortunately for him, that's put a bit of a dampener on his hopes for the lead there. But Andrew Whitehead, meanwhile, has seen that opportunity and taken it. He's taken it from Willingliss. Willingliss finding himself a little bit untidy, heading through Brundle now, and he's currently in P3. Colin Knief finds himself P2, still hunting down Andrew Whitehead, although it's now for the lead of the race, so the stakes are even higher. So you see Andrew Whitehead's car barreling into the right-hander there, the lean, all that suspension load there. Yes, something brilliant to watch. But the lead of this race has been chopping and changing over the past lap, and I'm sure it's going to continue to do that. Can Willingliss get back up to pace in order to try and hunt down those on the top spots of the podium? It'll be one to watch out for as we head down the centre straight now. There's a little bit of a gap. Andrew Whitehead will be feeling like there's about 4 bus lengths of car behind him. And there's only about half a second, but that will feel absolutely acres in comparison to what it's been for the past few laps, I am sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Although Colin Knief is doing absolute work, shall we say, on that gap, and so it comes down even more now as we see his blistering pace once again starting to show there, as he's already all over that back bumper of Andrew Whitehead. Shame for Willingliss there. I'm sure he was really looking forward to holding his lead, but it looks as though maybe some damage from Matt Daly, as he's now under pressure from Greg Young.
Well, he's just got past Greg Young.
Has he?
Yeah, and he's looking to get past James Rose now as they head out of Palmer, so he's already thinking about a recovery drive as good as possible. To see Paul Millman running P7 in the background there at the moment. That we've seen these two having a bit of a come together, have a very good battle towards the end of the race. Maybe we are on for another round of that. We see Colin Knief edging ever closer to Andrew Whitehead, but it's not having the outright pace that we saw in race 1, where he was able to just walk away with it, having so much clean air. He's having to fight for it this time round. and I'm sure he's happy to do that as they head down the Bentley straight now, enjoying that toe. He's gaining a couple of hundredths of a second as he goes down. Is he going to be brave into braking? He is not. He's a little bit too far back. A little bit of a lock-up for him, actually. Doesn't want to do that too often. But yes, Andrew Whitehead still leading the race for the moment then. In fact, no, it's not. He's got it wrong on exit, and Colin Knief takes P1. That was unexpected, shall we say, to see. Speaking of unexpected, Matt Daly able to get past James Rose in that tricky braking zone. Now P4. He could still be on for a podium at this stage in the race. It's still fairly early doors. We've seen he got some impressive pace. He's able to whip a P2 out of the bag from pretty much nowhere in the previous race. Now he's got some pace behind him. Some very interesting developments happening here around the just ahead of the midpoint of this race.
Yeah, it looks as though Andrew Whitehead just got a little bit too overconfident on the exit of bomb hole there. Colin Knief able to snatch up that position as Andrew Whitehead was trying to kind of snatch it back over the grass. Not ideal for him there, but he's back in P2 now. Hopefully trying to keep the pressure on Colin, although that gap is starting to creep up ever so slightly now. Yeah, hopefully for the sake of the race that these two can, Andrew Whitehead can put in some blistering laps and stick to the back of him, or maybe Matt Daly now in P4, looking as though he's going to be making a bit of a recovery. Will Inglis obviously looking to potentially hold on to his last step on the podium. He might have a bit between his teeth after the antics that happened earlier on in the race that caused Will Inglis to lose his lead of the race. I think he's probably going to be committed to keeping his place from Matt Daly once again, as we see James Rose there looking very tidy, and I must say, one of the best looking cars on the grid.
Yeah, you're a fan of that one, aren't you?
I'm a really big fan of that one. I also must say, where is she? Rosie Hudson's very bright.
Yes, I like that one.
That's another one that stands out for me, down in P10.
It's a bit like Andrew Brown is in the Formula Alpha.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And George Battersby down in P9. I'm not sure what happened there. Maybe some troubles earlier on in the race, but he's not where we expect him to be at this point in the race. Down in the AMPAC, fighting for the points places. He's currently in P9. We normally expect a good kind of top 5 performance from him. So yeah, I wonder what's happened there.
We see James Rose getting very close to Greg Young out in front on exit of Williams. Then he's been able to build a little bit of a gap though, heading into Brundle.
Yeah, so a little bit more sedate now after the frantic first half of this race. It looks as though guys are sort of settling into their spots on the track. Some relatively good battles that could look as though they're going for the long haul, but no extreme cars going 3 wide or 3 cars within. I'm
not sure my voice could take it if it carried on. To be honest, this is the first race we've done in a while where I've actually had a usable voice. It was very good to squeak at you last week, but now I am back with a working voice, and I hope to keep that going. Although, for the sake of a brilliant race, if I lose my voice, I'm more than happy to do that.
Yeah, it looks as though Andrew Whitehead Andrew Whitehead actually capable of sticking to the back of Colin Knief more than we'd expect, more than we saw in the first race. That gap still less than 2 seconds after a couple of laps, as we see him run really, really deep there. That's not going to do him any joys there. He loses a couple of tenths in that corner alone. But yeah, Colin Knief potentially just having used up a bit of the energy in his tyres, or maybe having to conserve a bit of fuel, or I'm not sure what's going on with him there, but not pulling away quite as much as we expect from him. And Will Inglis doing a sterling job to stick around within 5.5 seconds of the lead there. He's doing really well after a good weekend so far. It looks as though it's going to be another good result for him in race 2 as we've just crossed the halfway point of this second race. Matt Daly still with it all to do from P4, a long way, almost the length of the Bentley Straight behind Will Inglis, trying to get that last podium place and secure a double 3rd place in this weekend's racing.
Yeah, I'm sure he wishes. I'm sure he wishes he has a multi-air engine. To be honest, these TCRs don't. And we've seen the work that the multi-air engine can do in the Formula. I'm not biased at all here. We've seen the work that the multi-air engine can do in the Formula Alphas, so I'm sure he's been wishing that this 400 horsepower TCR engine was swapped for that mighty 1.4 litre, 1.4 multi-air Alpha engine that we are. Rumour has it, I'm not allowed to say too much. I'm sure the organisers will get very cross with me. Rumour has it we are ditching that engine for the Formula Alpha next year, and we're coming up with a few interesting options for the car for next year, so stay tuned for that. Where, of course, we enjoyed towards the end of the first half of the year's running, we enjoyed a few testing sessions that were brilliant fun to watch. and we may be having more of that soon. But it looks like Andrew Whitehead has actually started to drop off just a little bit now in terms of pace when it comes to Conklin. Conklin starting to find that rhythm again. If you've seen him on his previous lap, 2 purple sectors, a 1:53.6 on his previous lap there. So he is back up to form, is Colin Knief in P1 once again. This is going to be, I have a feeling, another Grand Slam weekend for him, where he extends that lead out in front even more.
Yeah, absolutely. So often we see that with Colin Knief, just for pace, I think is probably the best way to put it. No one can really keep a lid on him. Yeah, Andrew Whitehead looking as though he's keeping the same sort of gap to Will Inglis behind that. Doesn't seem to have changed particularly much. So for his sake, I think it's probably a bit of a kind of slap in the face and a pat on the back as well. It's a bit of a slap in the face that he's losing that gap to that gap is stretching to P1, but also good that he's keeping the delta on P3. So he's relatively comfortable where he is now.
Yes, of course, all of these drivers are actually very good in these cars these days. The Giulietta TCR is something that I'm quite familiar with. We have recently been entering a TCR sim challenge, open up to other members of the public as well, not just an AROC event. These drivers have all been enjoying that and qualifying for it. So getting more and more experience, and that is showing, I think, in these races. They are starting to get really quite handy behind the wheels of these touring cars. It's always good to see them develop like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to see these guys really able to drive these cars in their own way. We haven't seen anyone be particularly copy-pasted of another driver. Everyone seems to be taking slightly different lines, different amounts of curve, different braking points.
All going to space.
All going to space, as was the case in the last race. But yeah, it's good to see these guys. Seem to be very happy in these cars. These cars look very good, and they look very comfortable around this sort of track.
A bit of a fan of the Giulietta, aren't you?
I am, yeah, I must admit. I think it's probably my favourite of the touring cars that we run.
Okay. I thought you were about to say favourite Alpha then for a second, then I was going to have words with you. It was about to become a very lonely and quiet commentary for a brief second there, but don't worry, it's fine. As we head down the centre straight with James Rose and Greg Young. James Rose has shown kind of glimpses of being on pace with Greg Young there for a second, but it starts to drop off just a little bit. He may be able to claw him back as we head into the later stage of the race. Everyone now running the soft tyre. Rob Whitney was on the mediums previously, but he's opted to go for that soft. So yeah, maybe as we were kind of umming and ahhing in race one as to whether or not the medium might come good towards the end of the race, it may not have been the case for Rob.
Yeah, always good to see a little bit of a change in strategy. Always nice to potentially see one other driver kind of throwing a spanner in the works potentially, but no, it doesn't look as though that tyre. Should it have been a 35-minute race or maybe a 40-minute race? That might have been a different story, but it looks as though pace-wise they were about even. I think they didn't look to be a huge amount of pace disadvantage of being on the mediums, but I think it's just probably better if the softs aren't going to go off before the end of the race. You can use them a bit more, and they're a bit easier to lean on as the race goes on. It's always good to have a tyre that you can trust to be there and be able to put some stress through.
Starting to see Colin Knief starting to run away with it once again. It was actually a change for position there. Guy Swarbrick, not quite sure what's happened there. Not sure if there was contact. I don't believe so. I think it was just maybe a little bit of difficulties as the tyres started to get a little bit older. Colin Knief actually saying a fast lap of the race now, 1:53.5, getting quicker and quicker as time goes on. But yeah, unfortunately for Guy, not quite the weekend he would have wanted, having a couple of issues in race one as well.
Yeah, unfortunately for Guy, it just looks as though he's not been particularly comfortable at the circuit. Sometimes the circuit car combination isn't always in your favour, and that looks as though it might well have just been the case for Guy this time around. As we see this battle, not potentially, that's a very interesting line there.
From Rob Whitney.
Using all of the road and a little bit more, Rob Whitney.
Yes, always good to have a bit of rallycross experience, I find. It's cooling down the tyres as well. These TCRs do work the front tyres quite aggressively. My record's about 200 degrees. I'm not sure if that's physically possible, but it's what I achieved.
Not sure if that's rubber or soup attached to the front end of
your car. It felt like soup. Yes, it's quite funny actually. Guy Swarbrick usually doesn't like me commentating on him because he tends to have a very nice race, and then I'll commentate on the fact that he's having quite a nice race and entirely undo all of his efforts. I think back to Monaco, first half of this year's running, where he actually put in a stellar job, ended up taking home the podium, I believe, or might have lost it just yet. I can't quite remember, and I apologise. But he was kind of having a little bit of a go at me for daring to commentate on it, because my commentator's curse, which is quite often in full effect, could have undone all of his efforts. So sorry if it is my doing this time around. I can pin some of the blame on Lewis finally now, though.
I'm not taking any of that. That's not my choosing. As we see Will Inglis there again, very happy to be sat in P3. Not Matt Daly not showing the pace that he necessarily showed in race.
That's a very good point, actually. Yeah, we're not seeing. He was hanging around the 154s, 155s in the last race. Was Matt Daly, but yeah, not quite seeing that push towards the podium that I thought we might do. Still 5 minutes to go, so don't count him out yet. Never know, it could be a mistake further up the field, as we see. I believe Rosie Hudson has had a little bit of an incident with Anne Wall at some 71 miles an hour. That is quite the accident. It's good that the car is able to carry on, although I'm sure it's not feeling entirely healthy after that. As we see, these two are still reasonably close together. James Rose starting to drop off just a little bit now, and as you mentioned before, everyone's starting to find kind of their groove, find their rhythm, the bit of the track that they are comfortable occupying as we enter the final stages of this race now.
Yeah, so Matt Daly there in P4 looks as though his best lap is quicker than Will Inglis's, but potentially his average lap is about the same, which is why we're not seeing that gap close any more than it was. About 6-ish seconds, 5.5 to 6 seconds, the gap between the two of them there, with 4.5 minutes to go plus a lap. That, potentially it's definitely closable for Matt Daly. That is definitely something that we've seen him have the ability to do. But I think Will Inglis is probably quite comfortable in P3 at the moment. Again, Andrew Whitehead in P2, very comfortable, sat where he is, holding about a 6-second gap to P1. Colin Keneath not running away with it as much as he did do in race 1, but still looking very confident now in the lead.
Yes, after working his way through the grid and having to really work for it as well, early on in the race, he finds himself about 6 seconds ahead of Andrew Whitehead, and someone else who is working for track position. It is George Brook-Battersby. He is now going to have to work in order to take P8 from Rob Whitney. It's going to be a very nice battle towards the end of the race between these two now. Yeah, we've seen Rob Whitney has really developed very nicely as a driver in the second half of this year's running, and he is going to be ample competition to George Brook-Battersby. We head down the Bentley straight now. George gets a very nice exit there. He's able to gain just a little bit, about just over a second, or just over half a second rather, separating them as we head down the Bentley straight. In the speech, 152 miles an hour. That is one of the highest we've seen all weekend. London braking there, we see the back end of Rob Whitney's car stepping out, and as we've seen for a couple of drivers, it's either a bit too aggressive on the brakes or just trying to carry too much speed, but for whatever reason it upsets the back end of the car, that weight balance, and just sends you flying.
Yeah, it's a very difficult corner, as you said. It's a very difficult corner to get right. You're coming into it an absolute lick. You are really, really flying into that corner, and you've got to get your braking point right. And then if you get it slightly wrong, you're then trying to throw the car into the next corner. That's sharp right-hander of Nelson, and that's when the weight balance just is not in your favour, and it's very, very easy, as we've seen there, to just lose the back end of the car and end up nosing into a wall at quite a speed as well, at about 40 mile an hour there for Rob Whitney. So George Brook-Battersby happy to take the position, probably happy to not have to fight too hard for it. Bit disappointing for us because we would look forward to seeing a bit of on-track battling there, but it looks as though we are going to see George Brook-Battersby potentially making a move, as we see James Rose looking around a bit deep there into, I think that is Agostini. But yeah, no, I think we're seeing some of these guys, as we've said, just after we say that these guys are looking really, really good in these cars, potentially just getting the braking slightly wrong, getting the weight balance. It's so easy to just misjudge the weight balance of these cars and end up.
Yeah, especially as the behaviour of the car changes so drastically. You think where the fuel tank is on these cars, it's very helpful actually to have quite a heavy fuel load in, because it brings your weight distribution a bit towards the more friendly side of the scales. But yeah, so these cars changing as we go through the races. And James Rose still about that 2 second mark behind Greg, and Greg Young a little bit of a lock-up heading into Nelson there. Much like we saw in race 1, only not to quite the same extent. He got himself in a bit of a brake-locking rut in race 1, but seems to, unless you've missed it, seems to have been able to avoid that this time round, as Andrew Whitehead rather sets his fastest lap of the race so far with a 154.3.
only 2/10 off Colin Keneep on that last lap there. So,
Interesting.
So yeah, maybe just starting to potentially put the screws to him a bit late. It must be said, as we've only got about a minute and a half left in this race. And speaking of a bit late, it looks as though Matt Daly is making a bit of a charge towards Will Inglis, closing that gap down to about 4 seconds, maybe 3.5 seconds. But it looks as though, unless anything else is to change, it looks as though it might be a little too late for Matt Daly after a stellar first couple of laps with him and 3 others, the 3 cars in front of him, all being within about a second of each other for a good few corners there. It looks as though, unfortunately for him, he's lost out on that battle.
Yeah, still a good haul of points for him, but it will be a case of shoulda, woulda, coulda. I have a feeling for Matt there. And it won't be helpful in the charge for the championship. We're heading into the later stages of this series now. Only about 4 rounds to go after this one, 3 maybe. So yeah, every point counts now. And Matt Daly, I am sure, will be leaving this race weekend feeling somewhat frustrated after an otherwise brilliant battle and a brilliant race weekend that has been demonstrated by a few drivers, not just Matt, this weekend.
Yeah, some definite positives to take out of it. It must be said, these guys have put on a real show for us this time around at Snetterton. There's been some exceptional wheel-to-wheel racing. It looks as though we might be about to witness a little bit more here. Paul Millman currently in the lead of the AM race, trying to hold off George Battersby potentially for those last couple of points. It looks as though, I believe that's Colin Keneep entering the penultimate lap, potentially. Yeah, there we go. So, we've got another couple of laps for these two to have this battle. Paul Millman's probably going to try as hard as he dares to hold on to that position. But at the end of the day, he is still taking home that.
He got a little bit upset for George Battersby there. I think everyone's tried to be quite brave, or a few people have tried to be quite brave into that braking zone there, and it has caught them out. George is able to catch it, and he's still right on the rear bumper of Paul. But yeah, I imagine a bit of a wake-up call for George. That braking zone there, he needs to concentrate on keeping the nose clean and trying to get past Paul, which he should be able to do if he plays his cards right. There's a little bit of traffic out in front though. We've got all of a sudden got a freeway battle for what could be P6 based on how the next few corners goes.
Yeah, it looks as though James Rose potentially made a bit of an error there, I think. This gap
2:15 on the previous lap.
Yeah, so maybe
George Battersby gets ahead there, under braking, to barge in. A very nice move down the inside, very brave of him, but it did work. It was an excellent move. We've seen glimpses of raw talent from George every now and again, and that was one of them. And there's huge contact between the two drivers there. I'm not sure if that was misjudged braking or just kind of misplaced car, but for whatever reason those two have come together. It looks like George kind of cut across there, but Paul Millman wasn't quite expecting it. I'll leave that one to the stewards, I think. George finds himself P7. James Rose keeps P6 after all that, and those two, I'm sure, will be feeling frustrated. Not how you want an otherwise brilliant battle to end.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul Millman doing well there to give the place back to George Battersby. Obviously, these guys, no bad blood between any of these drivers. Some nice courtesy there for him to kind of raise his hand and say, you know what, here you go, have the place back there. Let's keep on going as they're coming towards the end of the penultimate lap. This battle between Rosie Hudson and Steve Knight for the last point position. Rosie going very, very deep on the brakes there.
Didn't quite work.
Yeah, it looks like she's about to lose out potentially to Guy Swarbrick as well. Steve Knight taking that 10th place for that last championship point. Guy Swarbrick making the move on Rosie Hudson. Looks as though she might be out of luck here at the end of this race.
So yeah, as we see as well, Colin Keneep actually on his final go-around of Snetterton for this weekend. But yeah, Guy Swarbrick able to get past the moment, although Rosie Hudson is still there to challenge him just a little bit. I just want to point out as well, Paul Millman, even after conceding that position, still leading the AM race for now, down in P8, so very well done to him for that. But yeah, as I mentioned just a second ago, Colin Keneep currently on his final go-around of this circuit as Rosie Hudson drops away just a little bit from Guy Swarbrick then, and it looks to be as if everyone's now kind of in their own bit of track. Matt Daly is getting ever closer. I'm sure he'll be praying for just a couple more laps or some type of mechanical failure. He wishes it was multi-year, because then you'd have a mechanical failure. ahead of him. I'm sure he doesn't want a mechanical failure at this stage for himself. He's still on for some good points regardless. We have Colin Keneath heading into the braking zone. They're still absolutely flying it through those corners there, getting past Rosie Hudson as well as we head through Bombhole and through Coram now for the final time this weekend.
Yeah, some really good driving from Colin. The rest of the grid, I think everyone's done really, really well today. So, yeah, hats off to you all. But Colin, the takeaway star, as per usual, it must be said.
Yes, once again, an excellent performance for him as he heads round Murray's and for the final time this weekend heads down the centre straight at an absolute rate of knots and takes home the race to win. It is an absolute grand slam for Colin Keneath. Pole and both of the race wins. Very well deserved victories to Colin there, and commiserations to Andrew Whitehead, who certainly on the pace but takes home P2. I'm sure he'll be very happy with that. And once again, another very good points haul, as is the case for Will Inglis actually on the podium. He did a very good job to take home that P3, and Matt Daly was getting closer, but unfortunately too little too late for Matt, taking home P4 there.
Yeah, a brilliant race from these guys as we see Greg Young. A very good performance from Greg Young, must be said this
another
weekend.
Good haul of points, and I'd just like to apologise if we missed out on that action there. It looks like Guy Swarbrick has been able to get past Rosie Hudson and Steve Knight. Steve Knight having an issue there. That means that Guy Swarbrick has found himself in the points all of a sudden. He takes home 10th position as long as nothing goes awry for him on the final part of this race, as James Rose comes home P6. Battling with Greg Young for a little bit of that, unfortunately, wasn't quite enough at the end there, and George Brooke Battersby heading round. Heading round to take home P7, and Paul Millman taking home that and race win as well.
Yeah, so a little bit of an interesting twist in the tail at the end of the race there for Guy Swarbrick, bringing home some good championship points. Any points are good points, it must be said. So Robert Whitney in P9 there, taking home some important points as it looks.
Yeah, this is great actually, yeah.
Is going to have a little bit of a tussle with.
I was wanting to watch Colin Keneath's parade lap to celebrate a brilliant race weekend for him, but I was also wanting to watch Guy Swarbrick come home with the final point of the race, but we get to do both. So thank you to these two drivers for definitely pre-planning this and putting on some great TV for us. Yeah,
are we going to see the parking antics of Colin Keneath again?
Oh yeah, we should watch him take his driving test again. Yeah, he did very well. Passed, as you can probably imagine. Did Colin on the previous occasion. Does he come into the pit again? Yep, we're going to have to see this. No, we are going to watch Guy Swarbrick come across the line.
Yeah, good performance from Guy there. Good to stick to it, and then at the end there pick up some points. Well done to him.
He is.
There we go.
He is amazing.
Yeah, Colin Keneath getting into his manoeuvres now, and it looks as though it's going to be the reverse bay.
He's gone to catering.
Are we going to see anything? Yeah, there we go. The reverse bay part. What can we expect from this one?
Maybe it's not catering.
Well, a little
bit gone on the car.
Oh, he's crashed into the tent a little bit there. Unfortunately, that is a fail.
Yeah, that is a fail. And well done to Rosie Hudson and Steve Knight for coming across. Oh, did he come across the line? Not entirely sure, but Rosie Hudson crossing the line as well there. But yes, another excellent parking job from Colin Keneath there to round out an excellent weekend for him and for the other drivers as well. That was definitely action-packed. Snetterton didn't disappoint at all there, I don't think. Colin Keneath extending his championship lead even more as we enter the final stages of this season now.
Yeah, absolutely. Looks as though the championship could be getting a little bit closer to settled, but there's always points to play for. There's always positions to be fighting for.
So, after an exciting reverse grid race, it is time to round out this weekend. I very much hope you enjoyed watching as much as we enjoyed commentating on it. From us, that will be all this weekend. And we will see you in a fortnight's time for the next CCR race, and see you in a week's time for the next Formula Alpha race.
Yeah, absolutely. Look forward to seeing you all then, and thank you for watching.
Yeah, thank you very much. Goodbye.